Test, test, test. Test 1, 2.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, we have a fundraiser Saturday night. Can you look at the invitation of who came to our fundraiser on the 20th of March and ask us if you can come to the one, and you could email them the information. I can text you, I can forward you by email or text you a picture of the invite. You can do the same thing, okay? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. We're going to start the hearing soon. If the legislators can come into the chambers. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the public safety hearing on hate crimes to order. I will ask the clerk to call the roll, and then afterwards I will ask Legislator Durree Whitten to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Chairman Ford. Public Safety Committee, the Legislator Deborah Muley, Legislator Sheila Bino, Ranking Member Delia Durree Whitten, Legislator John Ferretti.
Here.
Thank you. Legislator Mazi Palip. Mazi? Okay. Vice Chairman Stephen Rhodes. Chairwoman Denise Ford. We have a quorum, ma'am.
Could you do me a favor and give me the honor of asking my friend from North Hempstead to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, our Vietnam veteran, Mr. Joseph?
All people of this grateful nation, please put your hand over your heart, and all veterans a hand salute and say they pledge allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You did a much better job than I could have ever done.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, and thank you for your service to our country. All right. Thank you very much for joining us here today as we discuss the issue of hate crimes here in Nassau County and the impact on our communities. It is frightening as we see a rise in them, and yet we find that not all are reported. Without my going into further ado, I'm going to go out of line, I guess, with the way that we have everybody set up, because I'm going to ask Eric Post at least to first step up, and he could give the synopsis as to why we are here. Okay, and then afterwards I will ask our distinguished guests from the county then to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ford, and Presiding Officer Nicolello, Ranking Member Durree Whitten, Vice Chairman Rhodes, Legislators Pilip, Ferretti, Bino, and Muley for convening today's hearing on hate crime reporting. Thank you to Commissioner Ryder and representatives from the DA's office and the Office of Crime Victim Advocate for joining us. As the legislator mentioned, my name is Eric Post. I'm the Long Island Director of the American Jewish Committee. A little bit about AJC and our community of conscience, which is represented today. So AJC was founded in 1906 to protect the Jewish community and provide democratic values for all. As a 501c3, we conduct our strictly nonpartisan advocacy through 24 offices in this country, 13 international posts, and 37 partnerships with Jewish communities abroad. For 116 years, we have stood with America's diverse faith and ethnic groups to seek a more perfect union. With anti-Semitism and all forms of hate on the rise, our job has become even more urgent. Indeed, our 2021 report on the state of anti-Semitism in America showed that 1 out of 4 American Jews were the victim of anti-Semitism in the past year. We only have to turn our heads to the news this week to remind ourselves that over the weekend, 2 anti-Semitic incidents, one in Brooklyn and one occurred on the Upper West Side. We all have seen violence against all our groups that are represented today here. Just in the past year alone, your committee held a hearing on anti-Asian American hate, which we are particularly grateful for. AJC convened the Community of Conscience in November 2020. It is a national AJC initiative that is in many of our 24 regional offices across the country. The Long Island Community of Conscience is comprised of 18 diverse groups, including the Muslim, Chinese, Latino, Muslim, Chinese, Latino, Sikh, Hindu, African American, disability rights, LGBTQ, Korean, LDS, and Jewish communities. We come together to combat hate legislatively. We are united based on 9 principles, several of which I will read from our preamble. We invite all who share our concern for the future of this great country, our appreciation of its fundamental strengths, our conviction that it must overcome its challenges, and our resolve to honor the American spirit to join us in our community of conscience. Join us in the spirit of the American motto, E Pluribus Unum, as we unite across difference, celebrate our diversity, contribute to a shared society, and resolve to advance the welfare of all. Join us in the spirit of patriotism, as we strongly strive proudly and boldly to uphold American ideals of equality, of dignity, and opportunity for all. Join us in the spirit of civility, as we reject all forms of bigotry, incendiary partisanship, whatever its sources, dehumanizing and demonizing rhetoric and threats of violence. And lastly, we invite all who share our common concern for the future of this great country, our appreciation of its fundamental strengths, our conviction that it must overcome its challenges, and our resolve to honor the American spirit to join us in the community of conscience. Over the past year and a half, we secured the co-sponsorship of all 5 of Long Island's members of Congress for the No Hate Act, which was signed into law in 2021 and, amongst other provisions, provides resources to police nationwide to report hate crimes to the FBI. We supported a New York State bill that became law in 2021 to create a cyberbullying task force in Albany, and in 2022 have focused on increasing hate crime reporting on a local level, which brings us here today. We have met with Commissioner Ryder, the county employees who manage Language Line, the Nassau County Human Rights Commissioner, and other county stakeholders to better understand how hate crimes are reported in Nassau County and share why our communities don't report. AJC's 2021 report on the state of anti-Semitism in America showed that 80%, yes, 80% of Jewish Americans do not report hate crimes or bias incidents because they don't think it's a big enough deal or think that nothing will come of their report. All the communities represented here today bring their own reasons that their communities don't report, and I suspect some of their numbers may be even higher than 80% in the Jewish community. So how can we, the community of conscience, the Nassau County Police, the District Attorney's Office, the Crime Advocates Office, and the Nassau County Legislature work on this problem? How can we create an environment where hate crimes and incidents are more readily reported? Nassau County has become incredibly more diverse over the past several decades, and it is becoming more so. This is an issue we must address, and today is a great start. We thank the legislature, police, and DA's office for showing how seriously they take this issue by being here today. And I hope by the close of the hearing, we'll have taken some important first steps on solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. And of course, this is the first step. I mean, I guess it was when we first had the Zoom meeting where, both the presiding officer and I were on it, and to hear from the various groups as to some of the challenges and why it is important to discuss this in public and make sure we have all parties involved so that we can come to some sort of action that can be taken and, address the hate crime issue here throughout Nassau County. So, but today we have from the county, Patrick Ryder, our Commissioner of Police, Joseph Gim, Deputy Bureau Chief, County Court Trial Bureau and Unit Chief, Hate Crimes Unit, and Janine Deal, Crime Victims Advocate. Thank you very much for joining us. And I guess what we'll do, Commissioner Ryder, perhaps we'll start with you because a lot of times I guess when these crimes happen, it does go to the 911 Bureau when people report it, and they do report it to your police officers. So if you can give us some insight as to what the police are doing and maybe what we could do more as a group.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. And just as a comment is that, again, this is not, we're here to help and work to make sure that we help and increase our reporting. We all know that there are many victims that don't come forward and report, so that assistance, as I met just this past week with Eric and Dr. Ismet Chowdhury, Zach Bizing, and Gordon Zhang, and we discussed on how we can increase that. I brought a suggestion from the group to the county execs level, and we are in discussions on how to formulate that and how it would work best for everybody involved. The Nassau County Police Department aggressively, along with the DA's office, investigates all acts of hate crime and bias crimes. To give some numbers, to give some context to this, in 2020, our biased hate crime combination, we had 49 reports taken. In 2021, it was 54, and in 2022 year to date, it's at 12, so we're about the average of where we were in 2020. Every time a 911 call is made, whether it's a SWAT sticker that is drawn in the snow, or whether it is a hate crime of act of aggression towards somebody because of their race, religion, gender. We investigate it from the detective side. So it goes up to the bias coordinator, which is the deputy chief in charge of the detective division. That's from the investigative side. Every command in Nassau County is deputy commanding officer, the deputy inspector for most positions. He is the bias coordinator of each precinct. He takes both to make sure that the detectives are doing their investigative side and to push it off to the chief of department sides through the patrol division. That ends up in the lap of our chief of department, who removes it to our liaison, Sergeant Sabrina Gregg, who is here with me today. Also with me also is Chief Farrow, who's our chief of detectives. He oversees and supervises Deputy Chief Jimmy Barchow, who couldn't be with us today. Sabrina is also the language coordinator for Nassau County and works with the, again, our domestic situation. So it kind of, many of these situations intertwine with each other. All of our investigations are investigated thoroughly. There are checks and balances to make sure that we are doing it both correctly and reporting correctly. When those reports are done through the chief of department, it then goes to the county, and it goes to both the DA's office, the DCJS, and the ADL. So we're pushing it out many different ways to make sure that we're being transparent and giving the numbers. We have a very, very low, when you compare ourselves to New York City or to Suffolk County, very low in the numbers. And again, we can make that argument that it's not being reported, or we could also make that argument that we are a safe county and we're doing the right things with our complainants and our investigations. So with me today, again, is both Sergeant Sabrina Gregg and Chief Farrow, and we'll answer any questions that the committee has.
My question then would be that I know that you have this unit, and I'm sure it's very effective. But what, you know, sometimes I guess when people have to report, you know, crimes, and we're talking about people who they themselves may be immigrants or new immigrants here to the county and to the country. So they're a lot of times, you know, it's not in their mindset to complain about anything, and they'll take what's thrown at them. Do we find that, like, is there anything that we could do to encourage even people like that to at least, if something happens to them, to feel comfortable to call and report something that may have happened to them?
Well, those that have been reported, obviously that comfort level has to come from my police officer and my police officer doing the right thing with the community, and that happens every day. It's those that don't report is what I think we're here to address. The problem is, I can't send a police officer to make that better. I need the community to assist me on that. One of the conversations we had with that group the other day was, if there is a committee out there, and we started this a while back called the Points of Light. It never really took off because change of government, everything changed. So it's similar to like the Points of Light. We get people from within the communities that join this committee. We meet once a month, we discuss problems, but they become that ambassador to the community, the trust level, that they can go to that individual. They're not going to trust the man or woman wearing the blue uniform. They'll trust someone from their own community. That threat then complaint goes to that person and then to us. And then from there we can start to reach, maybe going back to the same person to get the victim to come forward and to address those issues. So again, that's one of the ways. It's difficult to come from law enforcement. We have Language Line. We have, our officers have gone through all sorts of training regarding how to address our victims. We do a great job on our solvability rate when it comes to these crimes. But if someone doesn't have trust, we need to build that trust, and to build that, we need the community's help. That I think there's a bridge between us and the community that can be those points that get us there to help them victims feel comfortable and come forward.
Is there a yes?
Sorry, I wanted to add to that there are plenty of flyers that we have out that state we don't conduct civil immigration enforcement, because the more that you see that, we don't have that as a policy, that anytime you speak with us, you interact with us, we're not going to report to anyone else or anyone. We're not even going to ask you what your immigration status is. And if you're a victim of a crime, there are even visas to afford you an extra buffer of comfort. So obviously that's coming from law enforcement, as the commissioner said. There's a level of trust that needs to occur, but that information is out there. It's on flyers. The community, our community affairs office, they're always telling people and trying to ensure people, and those are the faces that people see on a daily basis when there isn't any level of crime. They're out there engaging with the community on a daily basis.
So that, to build that trust, is there any special training that they go through in dealing with hate crimes? I mean, because I know, like, it sometimes, like, some people may not realize, you know, like, really what would be a level of hate crime. Like, even if they're the victim, like, maybe if somebody calls them names, they'll think that that's, well, everybody calls me names, but it really is hateful, you know? I mean, do the residents realize that that's something that they can report?
All the officers receive training in the academy now with the new
Commissioner,
in-service
can I
training.
interrupt you? I don't think your microphone is on, and I know you're close to perfect.
It's
Is
on.
Is it, all right, maybe you guys could just hold it a little closer, just because some people are having a hard time.
Okay. I've never been told I'm not loud enough.
I don't want to miss a word of your wisdom.
There you go. So there is training that they receive at the academy level. Now, because of reforms, we have instituted their yearly training, and part of that is about dealing with immigration, bias awareness, hate crimes, and how to address our victims. So, yes, they are receiving that once a year now, part of the new police reform training.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, Dick.
Commissioner, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2020 there were 49 reports. In 2021 there were 54, and so far there are 12. Do you have statistics on what happens after those reports are made? Like how many make it to the court system or are convicted?
I don't have that. I'll get you that. I apologize, but all of them are investigated, and our solvability rate is very high in Nassau County. But I will get you those exact numbers. But if they're investigated and they're found, we then bring it to the district attorney.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve, anybody? You might be, right, don't go anywhere because you might get away a little bit easy, but I'm sure after the other speakers, there will be other, you know, because it just seems so low to me. I mean, I know we have such a great community, but to only have like maybe 54 from last year reported crimes, hate crimes, it just, with a population of 1.3 million, does that seem low to you? Or, I mean, I'm not on the law enforcement side, so I don't even know.
No,
you know.
it's a low number. And again, I like to think that that's because of the county that we live in. But I'm not going to disagree. There are many victims that don't come forward in a lot of crimes. And we want to make sure that we collect that data and we also investigate them to give them some kind of closure. But when you look at hate crimes, I gave you the total numbers, but in hate crimes itself, in 2020 there was 8. In 2021, it jumped up to 19, but then it dropped down to 2000. I'm sorry, it went from 19 to 17. It dropped down 10% in that time period. So small numbers. Yeah, and when you deal percentages, I can use smoke and mirrors and give you a percentage. It doesn't work. It's a small number, 19 to 17. It's still around the same.
It just seems, yeah.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you repeat those numbers again, year by year?
So in 2020, there was 8. In 2021, there was 19. In 2022, year to date, there is, I'm sorry, we don't have that number in front year to date. That's where I messed up. But from the, 2008, I'm sorry, 2028, 2021, 19.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, how are those numbers different? I'm sorry, what's the distinction between the, say in 2020, 49 versus 8?
Yep, so the first number I gave you, that 49, 54, and now 12, that's combined, hate crime and bias together. If I break out hate crime for 2028 and 2021, 19.
And do you have numbers for years before that?
I only did the last 2 years breakout, sorry.
Okay.
just wanted to ask one other question while you're on that data. Are those categorized?
Yes. You want to hear it?
I would love
Okay,
to.
yep. So, for the hate crime, just 1 second. Okay, yep, hate crime. So, for anti-black, in 2020, there was 0. In 2022, I'm sorry, 2021, there was 2. No anti-Hispanic, no Islamic, no, and Jewish, there was 2024. In 2021, 2. And sexual orientation, there was 0 in 2020, then there was 2 in 2021. Now, if I break it down by the crimes, and I'll just run down 2020, aggravated harassment was 3, biased was 1, a burglary commercial was 1, a criminal mischief was 1, making graffiti was 1, and possession of a weapon was 1. I jumped to 2021, aggravated harassment, it was 6, bias incident was 4, criminal mischief was 2, criminal mischief to an auto was 2, harassment was 1, menacing was 2, possession of weapon 1, and robbery other was 1.
Thank you, Commissioner. Could you provide those numbers in
Absolutely,
some
I'll get it
form
to you.
to us? I think it'd be
Absolutely.
helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislator Rhodes and then Legislator Malan.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Commissioner, good to see you again today. Is there a way for us to estimate how many hate crimes occur that are not reported? I mean, is there any empirical data or research that would assist us? In other words, it's obviously it's wonderful that the numbers appear to be decreasing, but is there a way for us to be able to analyze or capture unreported crime? Understandably, I don't know how you would do it, but
Yeah,
I'm just
you don't know
curious
what
if
you
we
don't
do.
know. You know, and especially in our world, we don't know what we don't know. Look, you can do comparisons to New York City and Suffolk County.
Sure.
But we police different than New York City and Suffolk County. We are service-oriented. So I don't know how you would report something like that, or us to collect how. You can look at averages around the country, but then you got to compare demographics, you got to compare size of the county, you got to compare, all the other factors that will come in and change that number and why it is.
And in terms of community outreach, what do we do to encourage people to report a hate crime if it occurs? Do we work with any specific communities?
Absolutely. So we have a zero tolerance, as you know, when it comes to hate crime or bias. We're out both we are in Ramadan, during the high holy days, during the Easter season. We visit. I just spoke at St. Francis this week. I was speaking this Friday in Hicksville, and we always bring up hate crime, and we say if there are victims, you need to come forward, and if you do it through somebody else, that's okay with us. We'll accept it any way that we can. Our community affairs office is out every day in the schools speaking to the kids about bullying, which many times could lead to a hate crime or a bias crime. We're also out with our pop cops out speaking at community meetings. We're encouraging our victims to come forward. We very much welcome that, and we want to make sure that we give them a thorough investigation.
I'm curious if, and just kind of spitballing here I apologize for the term, but when we're going out and speaking to these groups, when you have community affairs, for example, go out or the pop cops go out, do we pass out any type of survey or any way to get feedback from a community to ask if anyone has been a victim of a hate crime and didn't report it? Why didn't you report it? What services could we be providing that would make you more likely to report it? Just to try and get some feedback. Okay. I don't know that would work. I'm just trying
We don't hand out a survey. We encourage reporting. Are you going to get honesty in the survey? And that's the other next question. Right. And who's going to answer the survey? Only those that have been victimized and not reported, or those that believe people have been victimized and not reported? And again, this is not a challenge at all, because we're on the same side. When we sat down last week with Eric, we want to get more reporting. We want to make sure the victims come forward. But again, I don't know how. I know how is that we need community assistance. This is one of these situations where without the community, for me to break into that community and try to get the inroads to get victims to come forward that are afraid, it's difficult. It's difficult. So we make sure that we let them know there are services that are there in the county for them. We give out flyers. We give out, anonymous complaints that you can call this number to file a complaint. We give all the options. Sometimes it's just difficult. And again, it's that victim that has its fears for whatever that fear is that drives them.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Commissioner, when someone makes a report, who is the person who determines what type of crime it is? How does that happen? What's that process?
So when the initial report is taken, the detective is the person who is looking at what the crime is, the desk officer. He reviews it and says, okay, this is an harassment, this is an aggravated harassment, it's a bias or it's a hate crime, and we follow what the penal is. When we make an arrest, we confer with the district attorney's office and we say, we're arresting this individual, this is the crime we're arresting them for. Tell me the facts involved. Okay, that reaches the threshold. Yes, we'll move forward in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering if maybe, like, as a result of all of this, we can all work together, and even as legislators come up with a public campaign to start educating our residents, what would constitute a hate crime, and maybe if more people learn about it, maybe they'll be more encouraged to maybe report it if they saw it or if they experienced it themselves. But so we'll move on to Mr. Joseph Gim, here from the DAs. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Do I? Chairwoman Ford, Vice Chairman Rhodes, the rest of the Public Safety Committee, good morning. On behalf of District Attorney Ann Donnelly, I would like to thank the legislature and specifically the Public Safety Committee for addressing this important topic of hate crime reporting. My name is Joe Gim, and I am the Chief of the Hate Crimes Unit for the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. District Attorney Ann Donnelly is deeply concerned about hate crimes and the effect it has on victims and communities. The Hate Crimes Unit of the Nassau County District Attorney's Office works with our law enforcement partners, such as the Nassau County Police Department, to ensure that each case where bias is suspected is given the proper attention necessary to pursue justice for our victims and our ethnic and religious communities. The issue of hate crimes reporting is an important issue. It is important to realize that all crimes are underreported. Being the victim of a crime is a trauma-inducing experience which can be life-changing and have long-lasting psychological effects. Reporting crimes not only causes the victim to relive the experience, but also face the scrutiny of others in the recounting of a traumatic experience. I know this personally. You see, my father was shot while our whole family was at our corner store in Baltimore in the early 80s. I would only learn more of the story as an adult. I learned that my father had been shot by a hired assassin for a rival store owner who did not want us to compete for the business. After my father was shot, our family was living and sleeping at the business with my father in the hospital and no one else to mind the store or watch the kids. The man who hired someone to shoot my father was eventually caught when he attempted to hire an undercover officer to burn down our corner store, the one where we were sleeping in at the time. Such an event changes a life and is a large part of why I do what I do today, but for many of our victims, it is a scar that haunts them for the rest of their lives. Reliving that experience and bringing more attention to themselves is often the last thing that they are concerned about. Crime reporting is that much more difficult for members of immigrant communities or those that live in ethnic or religious enclaves. Witnesses do not want to get in trouble or get involved in matters that don't involve them, and victims are faced with dire choices as well. Often, these immigrant families are operating on paper-thin margins to begin with, and a day missed at work could mean the closure of a business, losing a job, or getting evicted. They simply do not have the time to make a report or come to the precinct to look at photographs. Many communities have immigrated to the United States to avoid corrupt government. They are from countries where making waves or drawing attention to oneself can invite scrutiny from local officials and increase shame for the family, simply by being a victim. Add to that the fear that the police would not understand the language that the victim is speaking, or more importantly, not understand the cultural context of what they are saying, and it becomes a dire task to report to the police. I myself am Korean, but I have often met with Chinese or Indian witnesses and victims who have told me how they were thankful that they were with an immigrant's child who could understand them because we understood what it was like to live between two worlds. I've also met with members of religious communities that did not believe that I could understand the significance of their experience because I was not of their background. I understand that feeling, I do. And it is important that we're prepared to meet our victims where they are. Again, I know what our communities are going through because I have felt it with my own skin. Over my life, my father and my mother have suffered countless robberies, thefts, burglaries, and even violence. I also worked in that store throughout high school, and that's a large reason why I was able to afford to be before you today. My own parents have always been reluctant to speak with the police, and I am a bit ashamed to tell you that they often did not cooperate. This experience has informed my practice as a prosecutor and highlights some of the endemic hurdles to victim reporting. They are most certainly things, however, there are things that we can do and that we are doing to improve our responsiveness to these communities and to improve our service for them. It is important that those who report hate crimes and bias incidents are treated with respect and greeted in a culturally sensitive environment, ideally in their native language. Recruiting and retaining a diverse office and training our staff to be culturally sensitive increases our ability to interact with our victims and the affected communities. In the hate crimes unit alone, we have ADAs capable of speaking in Korean, Mandarin Chinese, Urdu, and Hindi. It is important that we recruit, train, and retain this talent. Part of our mission towards increasing reporting, and more importantly, deterring, punishing, and eliminating bias crimes, is informing people what a hate crime is, as Chairman, you picked up on. I have heard some say that words alone can never be a hate crime, but this is patently false. True threats made against a victim due to their race, national origin, sexual orientation, or any of the other protected classes of individuals may be a misdemeanor under the aggravated harassment in the second-degree charge. Most of our hate crimes in the penal law are not even in the hate crimes statute. Aggravated harassment in the second degree, in particular, is often charged for crimes not having to do with hate crimes at all. It is important that we invest in informational campaigns for our affected communities, and also that we train and retain our law enforcement officers to spot these crimes and elevate these reports so we can ensure that the ones that do come in are counted and prosecuted to the fullest extent that we can. DA Donnelly is aware of many of these barriers to reporting, and we have instituted changes so we can receive hate crimes complaints directly from the public. This is something new. This is something that we had not done in the past. I will say that when reporting a hate crime, 911 must be the phone call that is made to alert the proper authorities. After the emergency has passed, however, an incident may be reported to your local precinct, but now the district attorney's office is also a place where you can initiate a complaint, we can assign one of our detectives, and we can also investigate it through the hate crimes unit. The Nassau DA Complaints Unit, which can be reached on the internet at nassauda.org or at 516-571-3505, is staffed with investigators and prosecutors who will take complaints from the public. If the complaint is one of a suspected hate crime, the Hate Crimes Unit will investigate those allegations, and staff trained and dedicated and passionate about pursuing hate crimes will evaluate the case. Our Hate Crimes Unit will review the complaint to determine if this is a bias incident or if it is a potential crime, and we can initiate that investigation. Nassau County is one of the most diverse counties in America and is continuing to trend towards diversity. It is important that we meet these communities where they are to ensure that our community is safe and that justice is being pursued for our vulnerable immigrant, religious, and ethnic communities. Thank you.
I think you said it all. Thank you very much, and I can only imagine with your parents, with the store and everything that happened to you. So, well, I'm in a way speechless on that end, and I feel bad because I think that I'd like to say maybe that yours is the only family that this ever happened to, but we all know that in many cases, a lot of our immigrants that do open up businesses, suffer greatly, from people that rob them, attack them, or whatever. So, your family, I'm glad to see you here, and I think D.A. Donnelly is very fortunate to have you working for her. And I thank her also for being very proactive and starting to look at this and setting up a unit that will help deal with hate crimes here in Nassau County, because we don't, as we see the trend and trying to make sure that everybody does, like you said, even at times your own parents didn't want to report, and it's sad, we want to make sure that everybody, if anything happens to them, that they have the right and that they will be heard, and we will take action to help to keep them, protect them, for future occurrences. So, yes, go right ahead.
I just want to say I was very impressed with your, with what you just said, and my aunt married a very successful and smart Filipino doctor when she was a nurse, and my cousins are half Filipino, half Italian, which happens to be, they were stunning, very good looking family. But I remember being with them a few times, especially when we were all little, and, unfortunately there might have been some type of an awkward feeling sometimes, and there was a couple instances that happened with my uncle, and he could never quite grasp the English language as well as he wanted to, and he was always very self-conscious of that. The most brilliant man you could find, but he was very self-conscious, and that pride that he had, and I think that is our obstacle in a lot of this. As the commissioner mentioned, that there's a hesitation to admit that anything is wrong or that you need help, and I don't know how you get. I think it's a little bit that way in many cultures, but I found it just growing up as a kid. I saw it more in that family than maybe the rest of us. The rest of the family. There was a real keep it in and don't show any problems, and it happened a few times that he was very hesitant to ever. He had a problem with his daughter. Was very hesitant to reach out for help. There was a few. So I don't know how we get around that, and that's a complicated thing. It's basically establishing trust with that community, that if they do come forward, their concerns will be addressed, and in a way that they're safe, their family's safe, and there won't be any retaliation. I think retaliation is one of the biggest fears somehow, like what happened with your parents in the city. But I just hope we can, with you, and I love this idea of them reporting to the DA. I think that's a big step, only because the police are feared by some cultures sometimes, and maybe they feel that there might be more of a kept quiet with the DA. I don't know, but any ideas you ever have, we would love to explore them, because it's a real psychological issue as well as a public safety issue, and I think it takes a lot of care, and I know all of us up here are willing to put in the time and effort to do it. We just want to do it the most effective way possible that we can. So thank you for coming today. You were very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So thank you for your testimony. I have two questions related to it. Given that you also take reports of bias crimes, hate crimes, would that add to the numbers that the Commissioner gave to us, or is that all together?
So it potentially could. As of right now, we've been actually accepting and initiating our own investigations for a total of 1 month.
Okay.
So there's not much to report there, except we do have an incident that we are looking at. Again, I think part of what we're dealing with here is, especially in incidents where there is a racial element or there is racial animus involved, and perhaps no one got injured. There might have been threats, there might have been physical contact, but nothing where, sort of your typical call the cops to the scene and arrest the other person. In those cases, many of them can be, as I described to you, a violation of aggravated harassment in the second degree, which is a crime. But it's also the kind of case where, you know, do I really want to report it? Is it really to that level? I'm not calling 911 over this. So that's really, I'm hoping that we will start to, we haven't done any campaigns to advertise this necessarily, but those are sort of, I actually expect a large number of those to not necessarily be criminal in nature and actionable, but that's part of what we want, right? We want the community to feel like, hey, look, there's this going on. You guys should know about this. And for a lot of these crimes, and I've actually spoken to, you know, our friend from the AJC specifically about this issue, is a lot of these non-criminal incidents will actually become criminal incidents later. And one thing I have to do is prove that they were motivated based on hate. Now, if they're just reporting what happened during that crime, you're stuck with the four corners of whatever it is that was observed or said to the police. But if we have that database of non-criminal incidents where, you know what, he's constantly accosting people from the same category of individuals, that availability of information when there is an actionable criminal offense is what we like to call evidence of intent and motive. And that's the kind of thing that pushes us over the edge and gets us beyond the four corners of what's directly in front of us. So there's actually a lot of value to be had in the cases that don't result in criminal prosecutions. Certainly we're open to receiving those complaints and listening to them.
So you're storing all that information?
Correct, yes. We're categorizing it and we're having it available to us. There are certain DCJS reporting requirements, as the commissioner mentioned. There are certain statewide reporting that occurs with regards to hate crimes, and they have their own criterion of what should be reported. So to the extent that we're receiving them internally, we would have to start with that program as well.
And I think I heard you answer my second question, was you've been in existence for 1 month, is that correct?
No, so
No,
the
okay.
actual unit has existed in some form for an extended period of time. I can't, you know, speak to the exact routes. I could get that information later. I have been the chief of the hate crimes unit since April of last year. Prior to that, there was another deputy chief who was in charge of the hate crimes unit. Now, we instituted some changes before the transition, but this particular aspect, which is where we can take our own complaints and investigate them ourselves, is something that DA Donnelly instituted upon her coming to the office.
I see. Okay, so the unit has existed for quite some time, but this new investigative ability that's new.
Correct.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate what my colleague said. I think we would all be interested in partnering with you in whatever way you think would be appropriate so we can get the word out.
Well, we're looking for partners, so I absolutely am excited to hear that.
I think you have 19 partners. So.
Plus a room full out there that are willing to work all together. Legislator Rhodes.
What are the challenges? First off, I want to thank you for sharing your personal story, and I always am touched by individuals who take personal occurrences and personal tragedies and sort of try to turn them into a positive, to be able to take that negative and use it as a springboard to try and create a positive difference in the world. And your story struck me as the prime example of that, and I want to thank you for getting involved. And thank you for serving the people in Nassau County in the way that you do. So I appreciate that greatly. You know, it seems as though trust is part of the challenge. I mean, that's what we're all talking about. And I guess part of the question is, I know that we reach out to communities of faith and community leaders. Is there a way to encourage, or what I guess are the challenges from a prosecutorial standpoint? I may not be, if something happens to me, I may not be comfortable calling 911. I may not be comfortable calling the DA's office, but I might be comfortable speaking to my pastor, or speaking to my rabbi, or speaking to my imam, or speaking to someone else in the community. Is there a way, in the absence of being able to encourage people to report crimes directly to the police, is there a way to encourage them to report them to other community leaders who then in turn can notify us. I don't know from a prosecutorial standpoint, that seems to be a non-starter. You need the actual complainant who actually observed and witnessed the crime, I would imagine. But since it's not always about a prosecution, and sometimes it's simply about being able to tell someone what occurred and being able to affect positive change within that community and address the underlying circumstances. I mean, is there any benefit to trying to do that?
So the district attorney's office actually does currently have, we call them advisory councils.
Right.
So there was a faith level advisory council and various ethnic groups, and that involves leaders from throughout the community where, we do actually get referrals of concern, people talking about particular instances or giving us information on the back end that we can now follow up on and be a little bit more proactive about how that happens. So that actually is an important part of what we do as a DA's office. But Vice Chairman Rhodes, you bring up an excellent point. I find that well, first of all, if the victim's Korean, I automatically have, and it happens, right? I automatically have a completely different conversation with them than any other member of law enforcement has had. And that's before I even speak in Korean, although I can speak in Korean and do with them. But the very fact that I am who I am and they have a sense that I understand where they're coming from makes a big difference. One of our ADAs, actually our felony assistant district attorney who works in the hate crimes unit, she is black, but she's also Jewish. And she has a connection with our faith leaders in the Jewish community that puts them immediately at ease in a way that I could not. And I find that that type of resource, that type of cultural sensitivity, yes, can be achieved through training. Language can be achieved through the language line. You can certainly bring over other individuals to sort of bridge that gap, but there's no replacing the real thing, right? So to the extent that, and I want to just bring up this point, those categories of individuals, people with that cultural sensitivity, people who come from certain backgrounds, recruiting them, like everyone is trying to go, I mean, just think about the layers to become an assistant district attorney, right? You have to go to law school, you have to show an interest in law enforcement, and you have to want to go into a field that has been unfortunately much maligned for the last few years. So you're dealing with a pool of potential candidates that looks a certain way, and also you're dealing essentially, there's been plenty of articles about the burden that the discovery laws have placed on assistant district attorneys and how much work has really blown up for us in general without necessarily our income going up. It's already a tough road for a prosecutor. Add to that trying to recruit people from these diverse backgrounds. And also when we're looking for example, crime victim assistance. There are people that work for our office and transition between the victim, keep in touch with them, make sure that everything's going on correctly, direct them to different services, like even getting in touch with my good friend here, Janine, from the County Victim Services Agency. And, having a language-capable crime victim assistant is also difficult. It's a civil service position, which is going to, have its own requirements for hiring, and there's no way that we can incentivize hiring diversity or retaining diversity. And certainly that's an area, I think, where we can all work together to try to build in and understand that aspect of what we do. A diverse office of like-minded prosecutors is always going to be in a better position to be responsive than one that isn't. And, providing us with the resources to be able to do that certainly is helpful. Creating civil service positions that recognize that extra capability, such as speaking a language and allowing them to get paid a higher salary, that could incentivize someone with a language capability to round it up, become good enough to get that position and do that type of work for us as well. So those are some of the things. I just think it was a great question. I don't know if that's where you were heading towards, but that is very much, in my eye and the work that I've seen, one of the big sort of differences between building that trust is having that kind of a platform where people are going to be speaking to folks who are looking for that. I think also one thing that the DA recognizes is that, because we do have a hate crimes unit at the DA's office, it's like-minded people. right? Everyone in my unit goes to specialized training for this particular subject. Everyone in my unit, I'm pushing them to know the things that they need to know. And I'm also pushing them, pushing to find the right candidates who want to work these cases, right? These types of cases, are most effectively prosecuted, most effectively argued, and I think you can feel my passion here, from a person who actually cares. Someone who might have gone through that experience before, who has some point of reference for it. So I think that also is a big benefit that, DA Donnelly has recognized, and we've kept that model where we can do that kind of work.
I appreciate your answer. Thank you. Yeah. It sounds, it almost sounds as though, I guess the suggestion would be for us to, I don't even know to the extent that we can, that might be a Chris question.
We'll get him in here.
Taking a look, yeah. Taking a look at the way civil service works, in terms of being able to hire for specific needs, as you sort of alluded to. So, but thank you. I appreciate the insight.
The commissioner knows that we have to upgrade our specs with civil service.
Well,
and that would be something that we can look at, because
and there's a big, so your question was, would we take a complaint from a third party? And the answer is yes. Would we investigate it? The answer is yes. Would we continue to look at it and collect that data? The answer is yes. We take reports for everything. It doesn't matter. And that goes in the categories that are there to look for hot spots or repeat third parties saying that this person did something. So the answer is yes. The difference becomes in the DA's office, they hire people for that unit, the bias crime unit, that have the multitude, languages, and diversity. In the police department, we go to the victim, and of course they go to the victim. That's I mean physically every day we're with the victims, going to them, and we don't have that luxury to say, I speak Korean, I speak Chinese. So that's why we end up using a language line, which creates, another discomfort level, which is, it'd be great to have somebody that spoke every language at every scene to address that victims. But my police officers are just as passionate and just as thoughtful and caring and respectful to our victims, in those type of cases. There are challenges, yes, but I'm careful how I answer this. You're never going to meet all the challenges. It's just not going to be there. The most important thing is that you are fair and you're being respectful. And they're the two things that we push our officers all the time. And then use the resources like Janine or the DA's office or the multitude of languages that we have in the police department. Hey, get me somebody. In this type of case, I need to have an actual translator and not the man or woman on the other side of this phone, if that helps.
It does. From that standpoint, are there any additional resources that you need from this legislature that would assist?
I think the biggest thing that we took on was Language Line, and then how do you actually use Language Line? And now we put police officers with a phone in every car. The county exec has approached me about giving every police officer a phone now. But again, there's conversations we have to have with both the union and the government side. And there's also cost effectiveness. Is that the right way to go? Is it the best way? Or is it a better way to improve on Language Line? Hiring the more diverse and having the extra languages is always a great thing, but again, it becomes that same issue. Does it work? I honestly think, and our conversation, and I spoke with the county exec about this, and we're mulling it over now, is that what Eric and I spoke about. If I have, and I go back to that Points of Light, but we didn't call it Points of Light. Eric and I called it the Advisory Council on Hate Crime Reporting. And it would be a district attorney, it would be obviously Janine, it would be Sabrina, it would be some members from the government side, but more importantly, the community side that has the outreach. Who do they trust in that Korean community? Not Pat Ryder, but you know what? They may trust somebody else from the community that they'll go to that third person to build that trust, to get us in the room. And it may not be me. It may be, hey, listen, you don't have to come to me for the complaint. I'll push you to Janine. You can go that way, and then it'll come back to us. And this is, again, the only way you reach such diversity is use the diverse communities to work with us. That's the only way it's going to work. I don't have the luxury of having 30 people on call that work for me that can speak multiple languages.
Sure. No, thank you.
Legislator Bynum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, good afternoon. I have questions for the DA's office. So you mentioned languages. Could you go over those languages again that you said are in the office equipped to take these type of complaints?
Well, so in my unit, and I can only speak for my unit, I speak Korean. One of our ADAs speaks Mandarin. Sorry, am I on? Okay. Mandarin Chinese. We also have an Urdu speaker who also, and also Hindi, which is like a second language. But those are the 4 languages that we have available to us. As far as the Spanish language is concerned, we have a number of CVAs who speak Spanish. We also have an Urdu-speaking CVA. That's just our unit. I think throughout our office, we have some other language capabilities as well.
Okay, so CDA?
CVA, that's Crime Victim Assistant.
Mm-hmm. And you're the chief of the hate crimes unit, correct?
That's correct.
And the folks in your group what are their titles?
So we have, so the way that our structure in our office is made, I actually have a day job as well as this job. So this is a second designation for me. I am the chief of the hate crimes unit, but I'm also the deputy chief of the County Court Trial Bureau, which prosecutes all felony crimes that are not in a specialized bureau. We also have one felony assistant district attorney who I directly supervise and meet with the victims with as well. And obviously during the trial, I'll be doing it with her. And then we also have in district court, we actually have 3 assistants. District court is where misdemeanors are handled, and the pass-through on those is a little bit, they generally move on. Used to be, they would move on in about 1.5 years to 2 years, so it's good to have sort of, a number of individuals down there. So we have 3, but one is out on maternity leave, so, and one is also cross-designated for the military. So essentially it works out to 1.5, I would say.
So I'm trying to get at who are the individuals when you say they can take these type of complaints when they come into your office? I'm trying to understand exactly who those individuals are that are speaking the various languages that you just enumerated.
Okay, so when the complaint comes in, it's going to go to the complaints unit. Those individuals, I don't know the specific language capabilities of the individuals in that complaints unit, but they take the complaints there. Then it will get assigned to our unit because they're just open to take it. Right, correct. And then it comes to us, and at that point, there's going to be an ADA assigned along with our detective investigator. We also have, as I said, a crime victim assistant who will help with that process. But basically, once it gets elevated from the complaint unit and comes to us, then we're going to figure out the best way to sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah, because what I'm getting at is that in your particular group, based on the expertise of that particular division, it seems like there are higher levels of maybe training and experience, and I would be concerned that we would be going to the CDA, which to me, I don't know, but it sounded like those individuals aren't as skilled or trained, and they are the ones that are dealing with the languages that you did not enumerate when you listed out. Right, and so that would be the Spanish speakers as well as Haitian Creole speakers. So, we're here talking about diversity and what have you, but, the number one, language aside from English in this county is Spanish. And
That's correct.
We need to be culturally competent in diversifying that experience. Haitian Creole's got to be second or close to it. I don't know how we break down language access here. It's third? It's third. So, we have to make sure that we have, the ability to communicate with the number one and number 3, you know, second language learners or second language communicators and be proficient in doing that, so that that raises a concern for me.
We actually do have Haitian Creole speakers. They're just not in my unit, but
Right,
in the
but
event that
if they're
came up.
not trained to really be able to delicately engage in that type of discourse between someone who's a victim and someone who is trained to be able to engage at a level where they are proficient in this exchange, is concerning to me. That's what's concerning to me, is that we don't have someone at those higher levels engaging with our number 1 and number 3 language communicators, second language communicators here. So I leave that with you, and I do know that the police commissioner has his hands tied to a large extent on how he can diversify, but I do know that in the DA's office, these are, you know, the routinely non-competitive appointments that are made, and so that should make diversifying there just that much easier. So I would hope that we would pay some attention to that in the DA's office. Now, let me stay with you first before I go to the commissioner. So, you know, it's my experience as a layperson that when we're looking to investigate and sometimes prevent crimes, that we use every resource available to us, every platform, and that includes social media. And I'm going to go further than to say that, you know, some folks are just nervous. I'm backing away from that point to go back to it, so just give me a second. I realized that I wanted to set this up differently. My family are, I'm first generation American, right? My father comes from a very small country named Suriname, where they speak Dutch as a second language, but a dialect of Dutch, which is Taki-Taki. No one here in this room, I'm sure, is ever engaged in that language. It's a challenge, right? And then you have the more common languages, and you have the more common immigrants here who are subjected to these type of, you know, interactions that borderline on hate crimes or are hate crimes, right? And they're less likely to engage because of fear. But I'm going to go a step further today and say that it's because it's become normalized. The exchange and the hate and the rhetoric in this country has become normalized to the extent that individuals are subjected to it and just feel like, well, that's the way it goes. And I think it's because, in part because of social media has created all of these environments and platforms where people can just bully people and people can just, you know, spew hate and threaten people. So I know that when we're looking for child predators, we look on, you know, we're using technology to try and bubble those people out. I know that, you know, when we had these problems with these individuals that were, and I'm going to be totally wrong when I'm not even going to try and term it, where these folks were taking over mansions and throwing parties and, you know, doing all of those things, and we use social media, am I correct, Commissioner, to be able to identify those people. What is the DA's office doing? Are they doing anything in an effort to use those platforms to identify those individuals who are more likely to commit these hate crimes? Or, Police Commissioner, you could jump in, either one or both.
So exactly what you said about, exactly what you were talking about regarding the parties and so forth. We do data mine in social media. We data mine in social media both for hate crimes, for gangs, for predictive parties that we can shut down before they get out of control. We just did one just last weekend. Some we miss, some we don't get. Obviously, social media is a wide platform to deal with. We do speak with a lot of groups through our undercover accounts that are out there. Again, open source, not diving into somebody's private business. We get into these groups. We become somebody in that group, and then they communicate with us. So when it comes to hate crime and bias crimes, we look at groups that are the KKK type groups that we have that were out in Suffolk County putting the pamphlets on poles. We look at the anarchist type groups. We look at we have a large investment in searching social media every single day and working into these accounts to prevent. The world of prevention, though, is something that we don't see the number on. We only see the number of the crime that's been committed, unfortunately. But, and again, I'll just use New York City and terrorism, and if people knew how many terrorist attempts were made towards the city of New York that was stopped because of the intelligence side that was being done. But we don't advertise it. It's not the kind of business that we're in. But the numbers do come forward. So that's why a lot of the reasons why our numbers are so low is, and again, I believe there is under-reporting 100%. I believe what you just said. I was shaking my head, yes, that the world has gone in this direction that, you know, people are just like that. It's the norm now, you know, and you watch that on social media all the time. We stay proactively involved in it, and we try to get in front of it. We call it predictive analysis. We do it all the time. And again, it's worked. Could we do more? Absolutely. And again, if we go towards, as earlier discussed, that type of group that we formulate with the community, it'd be a way to get us into more doorways that have been closed to us. So I say, hey, you need to get into this chat room. You need to get into this group. I can help you. I can invite you and listen to the rhetoric of what's going on. We do see a lot of it, again, from a lot of our anarchist type groups that are out there, hate groups that are out there spewing it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there anything to be added by the DA's office?
Well, I just wanted to point out that, I'm still on, right? Okay, I just wanted to point out that, I guess to clarify that the police department has an extensive investigative and arrest function. Anything that the DA's office does is to supplement the work, the fine work that the police department is doing. So as far as our investigative capabilities on that front, we do rely primarily on the police department and what they are doing. That is definitely something that I will bring to the district attorney to talk about. That is certainly a capability where we could certainly collaborate with the police department more. But the police department is absolutely the leader in staying in front of these things and keeping us safe.
Thank you. And then, Police Commissioner, in terms of trying to diversify the police force, I've been told that, you know, the specs on hiring is like from 1970 something. I don't know how true that is. For civil service, period. It wasn't for the police. Forget it. She just said it was civil service. But nonetheless, in terms of hiring, when we were here, I guess last year or even the year before that, it seems like so long ago, on the reform plan, one of the things that I had requested was a diversity and inclusion consultant that would be able to assist the police department in review of, you know, the current test product that's out there, reviewing civil service, you know, policies, reviewing recruitment, you know, initiatives, you know, being able to assist the department and being able to really put together, you know, a comprehensive, and I know you've done a great work working with the Guardians and some other organizations with the mentoring program, but, you know, someone who is steeped in this DEI world that comes fully equipped with that level of experience to be hired to assist the police department in being able to, you know, go down the path of diversity in the police department. It wasn't included. I don't think it, you know, the only requirement for this body to support that initiative would be to approve a contract for that. It doesn't have, you know, that's not a local law that needs to pass. It's really an interdepartmental policy that you could set or that you and the county executive could align on. I do think there's significant value in that, and it's something that I would like to hear if you've evolved on that. I know that there was some committee that was set up that was supposed to assist in that effort, and there was a real eye-opening, you know, report in Newsday last year, and that's how that group or committee was birthed out of that, but where are we today? That committee, does it still exist? Does it still meet? Is there any, opportunity to revolve on hiring a consultant to come in and assist the county in doing the diversity work that's necessary?
So, thank you. And so, we all know there were several committees formed and groups, and everybody's looking at different things. The police department doesn't do the hiring. The police department doesn't do the test. It's done by a company. The police department, civil service sets the standards. And to be honest with you, the standards for police hiring are on the lower side of my partners to the east and the west. We only require 32 college credits. New York City requires 62, and I believe Suffolk is up there also. So we are on the lower end of it. What we've done, what I do control, and we've spoken about, is creating a mentoring program. And I know for a fact we had a batch from the last test that we have to deal with that batch first until that test is done. But we control mentoring as you come through the process now, right? So we didn't control mentoring to take the test because the test was already done. Now we do control it on the physical side of it. We do it on as they go through the process. And I know there was actually one young lady that I took a personal interest who was African-American in the academy. I seen her standing on the wall one day, and I said, what's wrong? It's my knee. And I said, what happened to your knee? And I went through the process with her. And I looked at her, I said, listen, this is a tough environment, but you can't quit. And she had thoughts about quitting. I said, did you speak to your mentor? She goes, I don't have one. She did it by the end of the day, and she saved and graduated the last class. Good kid, right? So our last group, as far as testing goes, the last group was 33% minority, which, again, not in many of the groups that we were in, but there was 33% minority. Why? Because in the consent decree, it says, if you get to this grade, this is the number. If you get to this grade, this is the number. And in Nassau County's history, we don't go that low on the test because we don't hire the volume that New York City does. And I lose many of my applicants because they go to the residency requirement, Hempstead, Roosevelt, Freeport, Freeport Police Department, Hempstead, Glen Cove. So, again, so what we've done is by this test now going as long as we're down into, and again, because I scored an 80 and you scored a 90 doesn't make you any better or smarter than me. It's just that you hit the right question at the right time. The questions have no rhyme or reason sometimes when you answer them. So what we've done is we're actually starting to see a larger increase of minorities into it. So in the mentoring program, getting them through the process, we've seen an increase. Going forward with the next test, there will be mentoring to take the test. There'll be processes put in place to help you get to the test. As I said before, the number of applicants that dropped from 3,000 that signed up to take it, 1,100 actually showed up to take it. So that's a big loss in that community. So we're putting all these programs in place. A lot of it, we don't have that control. The new test and design is being discussed with the current county exec and his team, and that's being worked on now to how we do it going forward. So we've done a lot of things to help with that. I know Sabrina Gregg wanted to add something to it. You ready? Hold on. Big moment for her.
Very passionate about this. And is this it?
Yep.
Okay. I'm very passionate. We just had a conversation yesterday, and when I say we, I mean the chief department, myself, about what we can do further. And just to share some of the frustrations, I was a mentor, and I lost my mentee at the agility. So these are things that are frustrating, in particular because they're beyond our control. As the commissioner said, that there's certain things that we can do that is within our control, and we're doing all that we can. But it does frustrate me that I lost my mentee in the physical agility, and that's not something that we can change. Or she petitioned, and I suggested that she petition, but no, it fell. And she's not the only person. I know Vicky Ojeda, who is the president of the Hispanic Society, the same thing. A young lady failed by 2 minutes on her run because of her nerves. She practiced. The day before, she said she had it. But again, the frustrating part is it's beyond our control. Trust me, I can't express enough how passionate I am to have more women, more people of color, how important diversity is, and without being prompted, which is why I was so glad you asked this question, having this conversation with the commissioner, because he's also, I feel, passionate about it, because we're having conversations that are unprompted, and just the fact that we just talked about it yesterday, and we're doing things. I just want you to know and assure you as much as I possibly can without you actually knowing me that the conversations are still ongoing, and we're trying to be innovative about how we can do that. I know that cost, because I'm a dreamer, and you know there's the ideas person, and then someone tells you, you know, how much does that cost? So being an ideas person and starting to be more about what does that cost, what's the end, what does that look like, I just really want to ensure that this is a conversation that does go on. We are thinking about how to be innovative, having conversations about, well, what's attracting younger people? How does that look? Can we do that? How do we get studies? How do we reach out to different communities that we don't have access to, whether that be the schools, whether that be the guidance counselors? There's just so many ideas that we have. I just really want to ensure that this is something that we are all very, very passionate about, my commissioners are passionate about, and that we're working on it.
Excellent.
Wait a minute, you gave her an excellent, you didn't give me an
Well,
excellent.
but I'm going to give you an excellent. I'm going to give you a chance to get an excellent. No, but Commissioner, I do know your heart is in this process, right? And thank you, Sergeant, correct? Thank you, Sergeant. I can feel your passion, and I can feel the passion when I speak to the Commissioner on this issue. In fact, I think it was sometime in February. It was a Saturday morning or afternoon. I bothered the Commissioner to talk about a program that I think could help here in Nassau. And so, you know, in New York City, they have paid cadets that they are funneling through a system that I think in many cases they're college students, and you know, they're not full-time, you know, cadets, but it's an opportunity for them to earn and learn and get exposed to, you know, policing. And I believe that that could be a tool that we could use here in Nassau County. There are a lot of things that I would love to see this department do to complement what they do so very well. You guys are on point on, you know, I have the greatest respect and support for your officers. I just think sometimes we need someone to guide us in the conversation and in the process, and that's why I stated that I think we should evolve on the thoughts of having a consultant who can assist in being able to identify opportunities and then guide us through a process that, you know, allows us to optimize those outcomes. The idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion is it's a science. It's not just it's an actual application. It's not something that only our passions and energy can bring forward. I think that we do need some real assistance in getting where we need to go. I do like the idea of the mentoring program. I think it's fantastic. I think sometimes the mentees help the mentors more than we could even imagine. So I think it's great. But I do want to see us have someone guide us through a process, because you're talking about right now that we're in the phase of designing the next test. Is that what you said?
Earlier,
Excuse me, Legislator Bynum and everybody. I don't mean to cut you off, but we're trying to get back into the hate crimes, and I know that this is something with that police
we'll
diversity.
go there, but
because
without
we
the-
have a
Can I
room
just
full of
have-
people that could give us guidance on how we
That's
could
fine.
deal with hate crimes.
That's fine,
reporting.
but I do think the idea of credible, you know, not messengers, but individuals
Where
who
we
who
have
are
people from the
credible
communities
in
that
these
they
positions.
themselves can.
I'm going to
form.
wrap right now. Thank you. So the test, did you say it was in design phase? To do the design. That's what. This is where I think that professional comes in handy.
Okay,
Thank you. Excellent.
You were, no, I love your line of questioning, but we have somebody else. But we do have Legislator Mazi Philip, who would like to ask a question. Mazi?
Hi, thank you. It's okay. I wanted to ask questions regarding the last subject you were speaking, but since this is not the reason why we are here, I will hold on my question.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to hear from Janine Deal, our crime victim advocate.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Ford, Vice Chairman Rhodes, and members of the Public Safety Committee. I am Janine Deal, the Executive Director of the Nassau County Office of Crime Victim Advocate, or OCVA for short. I'd like to thank the majority for having the foresight to introduce the legislation that created the Office of Crime Victim Advocate and for the unanimous support of the entire legislature. I am grateful for the opportunity to provide testimony today in a prepared statement which will address the subject of hate crimes and bias incidents, including the effect it has on victims, reporting, services available, and outreach. Becoming the victim of a crime is traumatic, but hate crimes are unique because the act is committed because of who someone is or what they believe. Hate crimes can cause profound emotional, physical, social, financial, and spiritual impacts, and leaves victims needing supports on multiple levels, including reestablishing a sense of physical safety and control, being heard and emotionally validated, and knowing that they are supported by their communities. It is imperative that victims of bias incidents and hate crimes report the occurrences as soon as possible. It ensures that law enforcement can vigorously investigate, identify patterns, prevent others from being victimized, and it allows us, advocates, to provide resources and services expeditiously. And while I just explained why reporting is so important, in September 2021, the U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Statistics issued a special report on hate crime victimization from 2005 through 2019, which is based on data reported from victims in the National Crime Victimization Survey. The report indicates that there are a number of reasons that hate crimes are underreported, including that a victim may believe that the incident just was not important enough to report to police. They may feel their complaint will not be taken seriously. They may not trust the government to act on it, and they certainly have concerns about retaliation. So how do we respond to this? How do we help victims feel empowered, feel heard, and validated regardless of the outcomes? Here in Nassau County, we do this through the collaborative work that you see here today of law enforcement and victim advocacy. The Office of Crime Victim Advocate is one of those resources in Nassau County available to support the victims and witnesses to hate crimes in the aftermath. OCVA was created by this governing body to support and serve as a voice within government for victims and witnesses who may be affected under the new discovery and bail laws that took effect on January 1st, 2020. New York State's criminal justice reform impacts both victims of crime and witnesses to them. These impacts include new discovery rules in criminal cases. They may compromise the identity and personal information of witnesses or grant criminal defendants the right to access their homes where the alleged crime occurred. The mission of my office, the Office of Crime Victim Advocate, is to ensure that all victims and witnesses to crime are afforded all their legal rights, protections, and services that they are entitled to under the law, and that they are treated with dignity, fairness, and respect, which is their legal right. I am pleased to report that since opening our doors on April 10, 2020, we have served 643 clients, including victims, witnesses, and co-survivors. Through December 31st of 2021, we have submitted 127 New York State Office of Victim Service Compensation applications, 25 emergency applications, and our victims have received approximately $740,000 in financial compensation from New York State, which is financed by criminal fines, forfeited bail bonds, and penalties paid by convicted federal offenders, not from tax dollars. OCVA has developed a victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally competent response to victims and witnesses. This approach is based on the idea that victims all have a different set of needs, and there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. All client matters are confidential to maintain a client's privacy interest unless consent is given. We receive victim referrals from the federal government, state and county agencies, including Office of Minority Affairs, Office of Hispanic Affairs, and Office of Asian Affairs, local law enforcement, hospitals, funeral homes, elected officials, Office of Court Administration, county and victim service providers, just to name a few. OCBA assists all victims and witnesses regardless of the victimization type, whether or not the case has been reported or its posture within the criminal justice process. OCBA also supports victims related to juvenile adjudications. We provide case management and vertical advocacy, which facilitates continuity of relationship and services throughout their journey. We have a Spanish-speaking advocate and interpretation services available in over 100 languages. We also utilize bilingual staff of the Office of Asian American Affairs and the Hispanic Affairs, and we have also translated all our primary documents into the 6 baseline languages in the county. OCBA has a comprehensive range of direct services that we provide to the victims and witnesses, which include, but are not limited to, information on how to report to law enforcement, assistance and accompaniment with actually reporting a crime, education regarding the criminal justice process, managing people's expectations, knowing what comes next. We liaison with the Nassau County District Attorney's Office and the Nassau County Police Department. We provide court accompaniment, VINE and DOCS registration, those are victim notification registrations. We provide crisis intervention, stabilization, and safety planning. My Deputy Director, Nora Duran, is a licensed mental health counselor. We provide assistance with preparing victim impact statements to the courts, probation, and parole. As I said earlier, we assist with New York State Office of Victim Service Compensation applications for financial assistance with things such as, again, not limited to, medical expenses, counseling expenses, rehabilitation, loss of essential personal property, funeral expenses, loss of support, lost wages, security systems, lock change, transportation, crime scene cleanup, and moving expenses. We also provide referrals for basic needs, social services, mental health, civil legal assistance, victim and community service providers. That's our direct services. We also have established a network of agencies and service providers that we refer our clients to, that we link them to. Again, this list is not exclusive. It includes, but is limited to, the Nassau County District Attorney's Victim Services Unit, the Nassau County Special Victims Unit, the Nassau County Domestic Violence Liaison, the Safe Center of Long Island, the Family and Children's Association, Domestic Harmony, Círculo de la Hispanidad, Hispanic Counseling Center, CN Counseling and Guidance Center, the Long Island Crisis Center, LGBTQ PFY, the Nassau Bar Association, Nassau Suffolk Law Services, and all of our county agencies. Supporting our victims does not start when a crime occurs. It starts well before, by trying to prevent people from becoming victims in the first place. We do this through education and targeted outreach. Some examples include our participation in the Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month Know Your Rights presentation on hate crimes, special presentations on hate crimes for all the advisory councils to the district attorney, which I was invited by Chief Gim to, and our newest initiative, which is the Hospital Outreach Program, where we will be presenting to county hospitals to educate their staff about our office, about victim services in the county, and about OVS compensation. Our first stop will be NUMC, and we already have that scheduled for the end of the month. OCBA also provides recruit and in-service training to the Nassau County Police Department, Corrections, and Probation, where we focus on victims' rights, services available throughout the county. OCBA is committed to partnerships and collaborating because this work cannot be done alone. OCBA partners with agencies on a local, state, and federal level, including membership in over 20 task force committees, coalitions, and advisory councils. These partnerships extend our reach and visibility, They connect us to the community, and they help to mobilize resources that can be used to assist victims with their systemic needs. One of these partnerships, specific to this topic at hand, is the work that we do in conjunction with the Nassau County DA's Hate Crimes Unit, which is run by Chief Joseph Gim. We work collaboratively in servicing victims of crime. He assists us with facilitating reports of hate crimes, and we engage collectively in public outreach events, and we actually have one coming up in, I think, 2 weeks. In conclusion, hate crimes stand apart because they are meant to send a message. At the same time, how we respond as a county also sends a message that hate crimes and bias incidents in Nassau County have no place. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Well, how many people work in your department? You sound like you need about 300.
Thank you. There's 4 of us in total.
Wow, and you help provide with 643 clients, and it's amazing that you're able to coordinate all of that and be able to get them funding through, I guess, the New York State Crime Victims. I love the outreach aspect, and I think it's something that we need, you know, to let everybody know, you know, whether or not, yes, with your ideas, I think is very important, but where we can educate our residents here in Nassau County that there are places that you can report crimes and how to avoid being victims of crimes. And I like that you're going into hospitals and whatever. Sure.
So if we do publicize the fact that you're taking calls, you know, as an alternative to calling the police and all, and if we use your number, are you prepared to, like, take on more calls? Like, do you have the staffing and everything? Because the last thing I want is for someone's call to go, you know, unanswered just because of the volume, if it does increase.
So our complaints unit is a full-time staff for receiving the public already. So members of the public come in to report a wide range of things, but it includes, in sort of a similar fashion, things that may be borderline civil versus criminal financial transactions, like frauds of that sort. Like, a lot of that material will come in from the public. So we have a full-time staff to sort of address it. But also, I want to say DA Donnelly has been very responsive to things that come in. So to the extent that the volume then goes up, we're going to have to shift resources and move appropriately to that. Obviously, we're already on paper-thin margins, so every penny counts, but ultimately, when you're managing something like this, you need to, I mean, I would love to have that problem in conclusion.
But, you know, going into the hospitals, I think, is very important. But what about high schools? You know, I find that sometimes, like with families, you know, if they're new into the neighborhood, they don't know anybody. You know, like, it's like they don't know their neighbors just yet. But when their children go to school, especially middle school and high school, they make friends, and then they become aware of the people in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, like, parents can meet other parents through their fellow students. So do you ever go into high schools and schools?
I think you'd be happy to know, October, my deputy and I presented to all of the superintendents in Nassau County, all of the Board of Education superintendents. We introduced our office and our servicing, talked about different initiatives that we had going on, and it appeared to have been very well received. We have gotten some calls from the social workers in certain schools, and we quantify that as a victory because, you know, we know that we are, you know, our outreach is effective and it's working.
That's great to hear, because I know that that's, you get the students when they're younger, you know, like, so that they're aware of what's happening. Yes, Mr.
I wanted to just mention, actually, one of the first times I was at a podium with anyone was with the commissioner. We were at a school district addressing a bias incident that occurred there as well. So we do, unfortunately, that's not the ideal scenario of speaking to a student body. That was actually an impromptu meeting. But when there have been incidents that occur at schools, one thing that we wanted to do particularly was to respond to the school districts and to develop programming specifically for them. I know that our office is already in talks with some individual high schools even to developing some programming so that we can talk to them just about like this question that we're all discussing here, what is a hate crime and what is a bias incident, is something that, you know, the kids should understand, like where that line is, even if it is sort of a fungible line. And that is one of the things that we want to address. Also, when there is a hate incident at a school district, that's not even coming to us for prosecution. That's usually going to be the county attorney's office. But we perform a function, right? So to the extent that we can address the student body so that they can contextualize what had actually happened there, and you know, some of the ancillary criminal justice aspects of a hate crime situation is really important. I want to mention just specifically, there was an incident that happened last year in a school district that kind of regularly had some, you know, it was an anti-Jewish incident. It was a swastika incident. And that school district had regularly had sort of programming on, you know, anti-hate from an outside agency, sort of talking about that sort of thing. So one thing that I felt like we could perhaps do for the student body was to get into, okay, well, here's just the generalized, don't do this, it's bad. But then there's the real world consequences. You know, the things that you do or you post online can actually change your life and put you in a terrible situation. So like that type of programming is something we definitely want to do. I don't have the juice to get all of the superintendents in one place, but certainly to the extent that that could be facilitated, where we could put something together in a fashion where we can address the student body, that's something we absolutely want to do and I think would be helpful.
Perfect.
Just to add to that, the community affairs and the POP offices did over 1,000 visits with our schools and religious institutions last year, in the calendar year.
They're a great resource,
Yep.
you know, so that it helps. So any questions? No? All right, so then I guess, thank you. Eric, you're up to bat now.
I just wanted to introduce, we have 3 members of the Community of Conscience here, which is our interfaith intergroup body that I wanted to introduce to speak. Dr. Isma Chowdhury from the Long Island Islamic Center. And next, Satbir Singh, who's a member of multiple Gurdwaras in the Sikh community, a Sikh leader, and representing Long Island Board of Rabbis, Rabbi Jamie Shulhevet, who's the senior rabbi at North Shore Synagogue. Please.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. May the peace and blessings of God Almighty be with all of us. I would like to thank Chairwoman Legislator Ford, Vice Chair Rhodes, and all the esteemed legislators of Public Safety Committee, Police Commissioner Ryder, DA's office, and all the county officials. Thank you for your time and for your commitment. And as Legislator Bino said, the passion to make this right, so which is very palpable in this room and on that screen. I think we have a responsibility to do it right. My name is Isma Chowdhury. I'm a physician public health practitioner and a member of Community of Conscience and co-chair of Islamic Center of Long Island. As a healthcare provider and a member of a minority community, I see the detrimental effects of micro and macro aggressions and, of course, hate crimes on communities. Where we are not able to dress or feel comfortable enough to dress in ethnic, cultural, or religious garb, a fear of being attacked in public spaces, schools, or even in our own backyard is detrimental and to all of us. Before I raise concerns about underreporting of hate crimes in the Muslim community, I would like to go on record and commend the efforts of Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder in bringing vulnerable and minority communities and police department closer by exhibiting cultural humility and evidence-based common sense policing. Thank you for that. Legislator Bino recognized Commissioner Ryder's passion to do it right, and the communities also want to partner with your department, DA's department, and with our legislators to make sure that we move forward with some positive results on this. When we talk about reporting hate crimes, there are numerous challenges and multitude of variables that are playing in the dynamics of underreporting of hate crimes. It's not easy to share personal stories. Thank you so much for sharing yours. And I'm going to take a couple of minutes to share my own. I wish, Commissioner Ryder, you were the police commissioner at that time, and I wish that the legislative goodwill 16 years back was what it is now. My son was 5 years old, and he was hit, called names. His name is a Muslim name, and now he's a tall guy, 6'3". It's embarrassing for me to yell at him, but he was very petite, very thin kid, and he was hit. His kidney was bruised. We took him to the ER, and we came home after the ER visit and to a phone call which said that go back to the country you came from, and calling us by our religious tradition as Muslim terrorists, and also saying that if you don't take your son out of that school, you'll find him in dirt. If this happened to me, and we live in Nassau County, and I did report it. We had to face the kids being socially isolated in school. Granted, that was 18 years back, and a lot of time people think that what am I doing in the arena of being a physician and a person of science and a boring person, what am I doing in this arena of advocacy for minorities? This is the reason. I don't want any other parent ever, whatever their socioeconomic status, wherever they're living, to ever experience to take back a hate crime report because they were not sure of what they're doing. They were not sure of the advocacy. They were not sure of the fairness. And that's why it's important that we all understand and the importance of this commitment that we are doing. Though we do acknowledge that Nassau County is the safest county in America, we are a suburbia which is surrounded by incidences of horrific uptick in anti-Semitism, Asian hate, African American targeting, disparities, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. These incidences do create unrest, a state of consistent and constant anxieties amongst minority and vulnerable communities in Nassau County. The reaction of this is a lack of trust for the system, a lack of trust for being heard, a lack of trust for being a part of a fabric of a community. Adding to these challenges, I would like to mention that there are challenges of culture, of not disrupting the system of authority, the system of power that is conceived by the minority communities. Also, not complaining. Language access we have talked about. We often forget, and one of the legislators mentioned, that spoken English and accents, a lot of times that becomes a barrier to communication, how we are expressing it and how it is perceived. Also, lack of understanding and trust for the laws, your own rights and system. I would request your attention to ensuring pathways to strengthen the communities and police relationship by putting together resources to bridge the gap by identifying cultural challenges the communities face in addressing underreporting. The social, economical, and psychological burden of hate crimes, microaggressions are huge, and we have to show that commitment to ensure that this stops happening. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable legislators, the Public Health Committee, Patrick Ryder, Commissioner, you've been absolutely amazing. And all the honorary guests here that are listening, thank you so much. And your testimony was absolutely amazing. I stand here as a, sorry, my name is Satbir Singh, S-I-N-G-H. I stand here as a father of a hate crime victim just about 10 months ago. It's very, listening to everyone, it just fills your heart, because I come here to the land of the free about 40 years ago, escaping India at the 1984 riots that were against the Sikhs. Then you come to this country and you feel, wow, this is the land of the free. Then 9/11 happens. And a person like me that wears my turban as a crown feels all of a sudden taking 10 steps back. Hate crimes is nothing new. That's been happening over and over. But we stand here today, we are much better off than what we were back in the days, and thankfully we are in Nassau County. One of the first calls I made when my son was attacked in Walt Whitman Mall was Commissioner Ryder, because I didn't know what to do as a parent. You know, my son had come back home. I called Commissioner Ryder, and he's like, listen, it happened in Suffolk, go here, go back to the crime scene, call 911, and this is the process you have to go through, thank heavenly. But not every parent knows that. We're scared. We don't know, we didn't even know the fine line between what is a hate crime or is a scuffle between two teenage groups, which was reported in the police report the next day when I saw it, and I said, wait, what happened here? You know, my son was called names and talk about Islamophobia because of our turban. My son was wearing a turban and he was called Muhammad, go back, do this, do that, and you know, we're gonna knock that thing off your head. And then one of the persons, you probably saw it on the news, came around and punched my son in the face. Now, when you see the reporting, you see, oh, two teenagers groups got into a scuffle, it kind of shakes you up, you know. But coming to reality, it kind of brought me in more closer. Thank heavenly it landed in my lap, because I'm very connected to the law. I'm very connected to the system in Nassau County. I actually go to the Massapequa Police Academy and teach religious differences on what Sikhism is, why we wear a turban, what do you expect to the new cadets when they go into our temples. So I was thanking God that thank you for giving me the opportunity to step up to the plate. And so rightfully so, I think we do need more education. Commissioner Ryder had said it right from the beginning of this meeting, that us as a community needs to step up our game, you know, because that's so much they can do as a police force. We need to educate our people. We need to educate our system in our communities to come up and really work with the law enforcement and the legislators and everyone that is advocating on this hate crime to come together and work together. And I'm very pleased that Commissioner Ryder and the Community of Conscience and Eric Post has been our backbone in getting us all together and literally giving us the support, because anti-Semitism has been there for a long time. And he has done the groundwork and given us a platform that we could speak upon. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here. So, Commissioner Ryder, I look forward to working with you, with the Community of Conscience. And yes, if you need to hire more people, one of the problems is that we could get volunteers to do this, but how many people will leave their jobs to go around doing this? So one of the better ways would be to maybe employ certain people in certain communities and say, look, I get it, you're giving that much time and effort. I mean, I'm a successful man, but what happens to the person who is literally working day and night to put bread on the table, and they want to do this, but they can't? They don't want to go around advocating and educating. I'm going to come back to my son for just 1 minute, and then I'll hand it over to the next person. So it does leave a detrimental effect on the mind. My son is taller than me now. He's 14. The other day he came home and he goes, I said, what happened? You look upset. Nothing. And he started fighting with me and arguing with me. I said, oh, it's the teenage years. I said, I understand, son. I'll step back. He's like, no, I'm really upset. I said, what happened? He's like, in gym, somebody tried to take off my turban. I said, did you go to the principal, or did you report it? He's like, no, I haven't. I told him if next time he does it, I'm going to punch him out. I said, listen, violence is not the way. There's a system in place. Go back. And I was very upset. I said, you know what? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go to your school, and I'm going to talk to the principal and blah, blah, blah. So now here is his comeback. He goes, no, I'm going to go, and I'll talk to the principal first. So at lunchtime, he texts me, and I text him back. I said, did you speak to your principal? He goes, no, that kid came to me and said, I'm sorry for what I did. Now, I know in my heart that my son is lying. Absolutely. Because of the fact that, again, how many times are you going to cry, cry, cry? Then all these kids are going to push you back and say, you know, let's not even hang out with this kid. So my son's scared. But anyway, we're there. We'll work with all of you guys to go to these schools, make this thing right. And as a father, I tell you, I remember being attacked when I was younger, but I am at a much better place than I was where my parents were when they brought us to this country. So God bless America, and God bless this system. And I love you all for doing what you do. Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Jamie Shalhevet. I'm the senior rabbi of North Shore Synagogue in Syosset. I want to thank everyone who is here, the police commissioner, ADA's office, the whole committee. Thank you. My son is 9. He's almost taller than me already, just to let you know. But I kind of need a box to stand on anyway, so it's okay. I come to you today to speak as 4 things. I speak as a rabbi, speaking for my community of all ages and demographics. I speak as a Jew who has experienced anti-Semitism personally and indirectly as well. I speak as a mother, a woman and a mother, and I speak as a gay woman who has faced discrimination and been too reticent to report on it. As I've listened to these amazing stories from all of my brothers and sisters here today, I went through what I was going to share with you today and realized that I, in my own story, have 5 unreported events that happened to me or my family. And I can tell you why they're unreported, and they're all mostly for different reasons. So as I go through them, I'll let you know, and I'm not actually reporting them unless I am by simply speaking in front of you, and then you'll let me know afterwards. As a rabbi with a nursery school in my synagogue, I find people coming to me recently in the past few years to say, I want to send my child to your nursery school, but I'm afraid to. Because people go into synagogues and shoot people. And I can't send my 2-year-old to a place where there needs to be bodyguards, and there need to be police, and there need to be people checking in all the time. So I'm going to send my child to a secular school, not because I don't want them to learn about their religion and be proud of who they are, because I am afraid for their lives. So it affects our entire community. As we begin teaching who they are, the first thing these children learn is to be afraid of what other people will think of them because of who they are. I have children who come to me that are afraid to speak up, just as Mr. Singh's son. And they come to their rabbi and say, this happened to me, and I don't even want to tell my parents because my parents will go to the school, and then I won't have any friends, or they'll beat me up even more, or they'll knock my lunch off the table, or whatever it is that they will do. And they come to me not that I will do something about it either, but just because they know I'll be confidential. They come to me because I won't report it. Unless they're in physical harm and they know that then I am required to report it. As a Jew, I have experienced anti-Semitism in my life. I grew up in Suffolk County. I am happier to be in Nassau County, although Suffolk was a lovely place to grow up. I was one of 2 Jews in my school, my brother being the other one, so once he graduated, it was just me. I remember my house being egged at Halloween, the only house on the block to be egged. I remember having money thrown at me while I was in school, all through middle school, all through 6th grade and up, not high school, but through middle school, having money thrown at me saying, "You money-grubbing Jew, don't you want this?" And I remember my father and his friend Jack Lorenzo, who everyone thought was Jewish simply because he hung out with my father, but with Lorenzo as his last name, he was not, but he's honorary. They would fix menorahs on the side, Hanukkah menorahs, because at almost every train station where there was a community menorah, at every Hanukkah, someone would vandalize 1 or 2 of them. And they would go around and rebuild them. And they would get letters from the government, the local government, thanking them for doing this. And yet it happened again and again and again every single year. And we would go out and fix the broken lights or fix the branches. And I remember doing this with my father and his friend. I hear anti-Zionism saying, I hear it at the UN, we all hear it at the UN, we hear it from members of our government in the federal government, and I hear, well, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, except that many people disagree with that. And when you say a country founded by Jews is this and that and the other thing, then anti-Zionism does become anti-Semitism. When you blame Jews for other people's persecution and say it's only Jews, it is anti-Semitism, and it affects my son, who's 9, and hears about it and says, "Why does the world hate us, Mom?" As a woman and a mother, my children, of whom now I have 4, the 9-year-old's the oldest, my children who are old enough to understand what happened in a Texas synagogue, what happened in Pittsburgh, and what continues to happen, are fearful when their mother goes to work. They are fearful I won't come home. That was not something I imagined in rabbinical school. I did not imagine that my children would say, "Goodbye, Ima," which is Hebrew for mother, what they call me. "I hope you're okay today at work, and I hope you come home." My son was told by a student in school 2 years ago that God doesn't love him or his family, and he goes to public school, because he has 2 moms. To which he then replied, to his strength, "My moms are both rabbis. I think God loves them just fine." But he did indeed come home and say, "Why would anyone say that?" My daughter came home crying one day, she's in 1st grade, saying that one of the students in her class told her family isn't real because she has 2 moms. And so she doesn't really exist. She's a bit overdramatic, so she asked for proof of her existence, which I worked out, but the incidence is still the same. Facing discrimination as a gay woman myself, I will share one particularly recent incident, although I have shared many, or I've experienced many. I will share one particularly recent incident which happened at a post office. My wife and I took our children, we had 3 at the time, to get new passports. We weren't traveling anywhere, particularly because of the pandemic, but for when we were able to, we wanted to get new passports. We went to the post office, we had our pictures, we had everything in order. We had their birth certificates, we had our driver's licenses, everything that everyone said we needed online, everything that we had looked up, we called the post office, had all of that. The man at the post office demanded to see our marriage license to find out if I was the other parent, because I'm not the mother on the birth certificate. Now, we do have mother birth certificates, thanks to Northwell Health, actually, and thanks to some legislation in our government. And so I am a mother on the birth certificate and a parent, but that wasn't good enough for him. I did not bring my wedding license, my marriage license with us, because it's not required for a passport for a child, and it is not required for a passport for me. When we didn't have it, he said, well, then I can't give you these passports. And we said, well, you've already taken all of our information. You have our pictures. You have the applications, which he then refused to give back. He also had one of the checks for it and not the other one. He started to say, let me think about filling it out. And he insisted on filling out my name as father, to which my wife said, that will invalidate this passport application and it will be rejected, and you know that because this is what you do. And he said, don't tell me what to do. You can't have two moms. At that point, while my children were listening to this, he then started to say that this whole situation was absurd, that he had stayed late at work to help this family get their passports, but now that he sees that it was us, he realizes he wasted his time. And he told us to leave the post office. We went home without our passport information because he had kept it, and with only paying one check. We had asked him to at least pay for the other one. He said he didn't want our money and to get out. Not only did we lose our passport information at that time, when we got home about an hour later, I received a phone call from the post office telling me that I owed them money for the check that he didn't take. I was then forced to drive back to the same post office and hand them over a check. And indeed, 3 weeks later, our passports were denied because I was listed as father, and that is not my sex or gender. So, luckily, being a rabbi, I happen to know a judge who was able to get us into his clerk's office and get us passports. Did I report this? I did not. I did not report when a child told my son that God didn't love his moms. I don't even know if that's a crime. I understand now that perhaps it could lead to a crime later, probably not from a 7-year-old, but when that child is older, or more importantly, that child learned it somewhere from a parent, from an adult in their life, who may be then doing a crime. I did not report when my daughter was in tears. I don't report when people are afraid to attend my nursery school, because how can we report that? And I did not report the post office incident. My children are very affected, possibly more than I am, from what happened at the post office, from watching their mothers be berated in that way and be told publicly that their family doesn't exist. Nobody else in the post office, of which there was a long line, said anything either, which added to my lack of wanting to report it. It seemed as no one else cared. In addition, the person who was saying this hateful information about my family was a minority. And I did not want to be seen as racist, accusing this person of something. At the same time, I didn't want to get anyone fired. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble. I just wanted to put it behind me. Turns out, you can't put it behind you. It is with you every day. As a white Jew, I have the privilege of being able to pass most of the time. I can choose when to hold hands with my wife, when to share that I have a family. Not everyone is as lucky. Not everyone can pass in the way that I can. So I've made the decision to not pass. Because if it's my privilege and no one else's, then it's not rightfully anyone's. So, what do we need to do about all of these things? How do I speak to my people? I agree, Commissioner, you need our help. We need to step up our game, absolutely. We need to educate. Schools need to bring us in as well. We need to expand what counts as a crime, or at least what can be reported and then educated about. And we need to make it known what is something that is reportable. What is something that we can speak about. And then we need to change the consequences, I think, not just of punishment, but of education. And not just of the person committing that offense, but where that child, where that teenager learned it from. Let's go up and find the source, and let's help each other to be able to figure out where it starts. Let's not just band-aid the symptom and the problem, but let's go to the source and really eradicate it. I want to thank all of you for giving us the time today, for taking the time out of your busy and very, very rigorous schedules to hear us and to hear our stories and to share with us your stories, and for your passion and for your drive. Thank you, and I hope that we can work together in the future.
I thank you to all the speakers that shared their personal occurrences in regard with this topic, and it is very enlightening and sobering and sad to a certain degree. So thank you very much, and I think that gives us all the more reason to continue with these type of hearings and to constantly do this outreach. And I guess, Commissioner Ryder, it does fall to a certain degree to your police officers, because you are actually the first people that many the officers are in our communities, your POP officers, those that are patrolling the streets, when the cars, that they're bicycles, they're walking, that they're the ones that people see right away. And so I guess it is important for your officers to be trained and to work with the communities. And you know, I just have to say that it is very difficult to interrupt a fellow legislator. You know, and I do apologize about that, but I really did want to hear from the speakers that were invited. So, you know, Legislator Bino, I don't know if you would like to resume your questioning or whatever you want to do, and followed by Legislator Mazzei-Phil.
Thank you, Chairwoman, but really, you don't need to apologize to me. And we definitely wanted to turn the floor over and hear those personal stories, and I thank everyone for sharing. I feel like they're interdependent, you know, diversifying the force and the like, and I think I drove the point home that I wanted to with the Commissioner, and I appreciate you trying to turn the floor back over to me. Thank you.
We'll have further dialogue on all of this anyway. So, and I know even working with the police department, we'll have a hearing, and we can, you know, we will definitely work with you, Commissioner Ryder, because we like working with you and the sergeant. So. Come on, say it with more enthusiasm, please. Okay. But Legislator Pillip, did you have a question or a comment?
I mean, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone. It's very important that we as a community come together to discuss, to open up, and to talk. I think we should have a love campaign. Maybe we should work how we as the leaders, we can really talk about how to respect and love each other, regardless of our difference. We can include the pastors, rabbi, religious leaders, and let's campaign love. I think that's really what's needed in our community. And by doing so, I think we can overcome a lot of issues we're having. My questions to Commissioner regarding the how to include more minority to the police. You said like about 3,000 registered, out of them about 1,100 taking the test, and I was wondering how many of them passing the test from the 1,100.
So, if I use round numbers, 16,000 signed up to take the test, 3,000 African American, 3,000 Hispanic, 10,000 white. 96% white showed up, 95% Hispanic showed up, 40% African American showed up. Of those, all three races across the board all failed by 50%. So the test obviously was balanced. My job is to increase the volume of our minorities that take the test. But if that should answer your question. And I'm turning my head looking at the screen.
So, Commissioner, are you saying 50% of them are passing the test?
50% white, 50% black, 50% Hispanic passed the test of those that took the test. The job was getting them to take the test.
I see. I mean, it's clearly something's not working well in this. I think we can do better on that. I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense. I think it's time to question ourselves. I mean, I don't know, something has to be done. We have to have more of them joining the police department. And, you know, I always say, if something not working well, I think it's time to to check the issue and see or come up with ways how to improve this for the future. But thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we have two slips. Mita Meriday, please.
Good afternoon, Mita J. Meriday. First, this hearing is vital, that we can all agree to that, but sadly, I only found out about it myself at about 12:30 this afternoon when I was trying to get information, actually the contact information for two legislators to pursue an issue that many of you are very aware that I am focused on, and I was so happy that we were led by the pledge by a veteran, because my concern and my initial reason for coming to this body those years ago had to do with a veteran who had been living in a train station in West Hempstead and was unceremonially just dumped at the Northport VA. And I came to this body to address that concern and that issue with the number of veterans that we have here. And I just find it amazing that public comment gets limited when it's still tied to a hearing. So I figured that if I was listed as somebody to speak as it pertains to the hearing and the issue, I would be given more time. But now the time is on, so I just I resent that somewhat. But in any case, when I presented to this body, I received a letter that was not pretty. It was grammatically inaccurate, but it was threatening to my life. And as someone said earlier, they had wished that Commissioner Ryder had been the commissioner at that time, because I brought the letter in a plastic bag to the then commissioner. I don't want to say his name, but I presented it to him and felt that it was definitely a threat to myself and my family. And he basically looked at me and was like, well, did anything happen to you? I'm like, not yet. But the threat is clear, and I'm looking to you as my leading official for the police department to do something about it. And he basically blew it off. And I presented it to this body because basically my life was threatened for presenting to this body about an issue that had to do with our veterans. So our veterans are also being threatened. And we haven't discussed that. We haven't discussed the fact that the Department of Justice says that 55% of the perpetrators of hate incidents are whites, predominantly male. So what are we doing about that? If we're not addressing that, and this body just as a week ago had a debate about a discussion on a term about good racism. Racism is never good at all, ever. So it should never even be connected in that genre in this body. We don't realize the things that you say here that's speaking to, we need to do something, we need to address something, we need to stand up. And then you may be the one in front of a press conference, in front of a picture that generally, 9 times out of 10, has a black woman under the guise that she's a welfare mother and that she's trying to take resources. You don't realize what you're doing to perpetuate these same stereotypes that create the same types of situations. I again came before this body when there was an issue that pertained to the designation of the offices of minority affairs and the other truly valid reasons to have an office of Hispanic affairs and office of Asian affairs, and this room was packed. And there was a large ethnic community that was in this room, and when I spoke, I was hissed at. What is that considered? That is not a kumbaya, let's have a good moment, let's all work together sort of statement. I felt threatened and intimidated. Wasn't scared, but again, these are the types of things that we have to work out within the ethnic community, but in the majority community. So if you're saying 55% of perpetrators of hateful incidents are white males, and we still are in a country that's dominated by white male leadership, okay, we have to address that. We have to address the fact that you do have communities of color across the board, whether it's a language issue, a cultural difference, or just the fact that we don't feel that we're heard, valued, or appreciated to come to the table. And if we, in a county where we have close to 80,000 veterans, and we have yet to step up to provide a resource and support center for our veterans with laws that are on the books, How are we going to effectively address the challenges that are impacting racial discourse? People of color, particularly African Americans, are the largest percentage of those who have racial incident against them. African Americans lead. It's in the Bureau of Statistics. Those are their facts as of 2020. Close to 3,000 reported incidents, and we can all agree that the majority are not reported. But 2,800 incidents are reported just within the African American community. That encompasses every other group. So that is something we have to address, but it starts with the education. You can't keep saying, oh, we need more police officers, because again, this commissioner here is passionate, he is committed, he is engaged, he is involved. The POP officers, and I've stood again in front of this body when this body was trying to cut the resources for the POP officers, fought against that. We have to do what we need to do collectively, but we also have to do what we need to do when you leave from here and you go to your respective communities. And I've been with this commissioner in communities where we had large incidents of drugs, and the families were asked, how many people in this community have a drug problem? 4 people raised their hand. And these were communities that were hotbeds of the drug crisis. So we have the ignorance, we have the complacency, and we have those who don't want to own up to what they don't know, don't say, and don't do when it comes to their own children. So when are we going to rise above all of that and bring about what we need to have in this county? And first and foremost, you have to start somewhere. We have a facility, Nassau University Medical Center, new health facility.
But Nita, that's something, and I know with the veterans,
but I'm saying,
very near and dear, but
I'm saying
this is where we are. This is where we are.
That could be a facility.
Today.
What
Yeah.
I'm saying,
right.
legislator, that could be a facility that could start to initiate change. That we could get state funding to address that issue, federal funding to bring that together. Those are the types of areas that we can, you talk about, let's do something. You can't keep having a kumbaya, a parade, and a sensitivity workshop and think that's going to do it. We need to step outside of the box. Just like somebody said earlier about children and youth, there's money in the state coffers that this county could get access to that would take the strain off of taxpayers.
We will work on that, and I think, I guess Bill Gaylor is the chairman of the Veterans Committee, so we will ask. Well, your time is up.
Okay, well, I'm just saying.
But no, I thank you for coming down.
We need to come together, but to promote this type of event, this room should have been filled, so I don't know how this was kind of promoted.
We did this as a result of a meeting that we had, and we wanted to start the process. So rather than waiting till after all the holidays, Passover, Ramadan, and Easter, you know, we felt that it would be better to start now. Let's open this discussion now. Let's start where we, you know, so that we know where we have, at this point, where do we go from here? So we could start working on it. I didn't want to delay it because I was afraid that things would happen and we'd never have this hearing. So this is why it was more important to hear from the presenters, from those that are organizing that, and to hear from our county agencies that deal with this, and that's why we did this.
Black churches have been organizing through the 1619 project, so I'm just saying, again, if you're going to be divisive even in this, you're not going to be successful. That's the point I need to make.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy Levitt.
This has been a great session, and thank you for everybody who's taken their time to be here. I've learned a lot. I just wanted to add my own experience with hate experience to the pile. My kids are a little bit older now. I'm no longer with the PTA, but back in the day, I was very active with the PTA, and I was when Syosset High School was graffitied, and a lot of the graffiti was anti-Semitic in nature. I think what Commissioner Ryder did was standing forward with working through a very complicated process and seeing it to a good conclusion was fantastic. What I want to talk about, though, was what was happening on the community side, because as a PTA representative, I got to hear a lot about that. So as Commissioner Ryder knew firsthand, when it first happened, everybody was up in, the entire Jewish community was up in arms. And our voices were heard, and we felt validated, and that was great. But it wasn't a week later that we started hearing from our neighbors in the community, it was just kids being kids. what's the big deal? A swastika doesn't really mean anything. The process, for a lot of reasons, took a long time to come to its conclusion. By the time it did, those families that had taken that, oh, what's the big deal attitude, had become so entrenched in their position that when things finally closed out, I had already been forward talking about not only what was happening with the graffiti, but other instances around anti-Semitic behaviors within the Syosset School District that were coming up, and was talking about how, hey, it's not about these kids, it's we have a problem that we need to address. When these kids were ultimately charged, one of these parents was so enraged, so angry, that she went as far as to forge a screenshot, put it out on social media, and say, Wendy's Lovett's son is responsible for this. Let's all call the school and have him expelled. Okay? Good news for me, for my son, I had the original documents. So it took about 5 minutes with the principal. Here's what she forged. Here's the originals. Here's where she got it from. Okay, fine. Didn't mean that he didn't have pressure from his peers. Didn't mean that it didn't cost him friendships. Didn't mean that it didn't cost me sleep and tears and ulcers and everything else. I did, at that point, go to the police, and I went to a private attorney, and I said, listen, she was trying to do damage to my kid. There was no law on the books that let anybody move forward to demonstrate to one of the ringleaders in this community that perpetuating this kind of hate was not acceptable. So there were two things that happened here. One was that, and this isn't anybody's fault, it's the system is the way it is. But the amount of time that it took to work through the system was so long, and there was not an environment within the community for discussion, so people became entrenched in polarizing views. And then once we did come back together, there was no consequence for any of the inappropriate behaviors that were the follow-ons to the initial act. So just wanted to share that. I don't know if it gives anybody a new idea about where we could go. I think the discussions about building relationships with the community, with houses of worship, with schools is fantastic. Just a little other insight into some stuff that was happening behind my curtain. Okay, thank you.
It's amazing. I don't, thankfully you stayed with the PTA for a while, but what a nightmare for a child to go through. Thank you, Commissioner Ryder, for addressing that in the way that you did. So, Legislator Rhodes?
No, thanks. I appreciate it, Madam Chairwoman. Really, no other questions from me, and just a comment and a thank you to all of our speakers and our presenters today for sharing your stories. I know Mr. Singh had made reference to some of his experience after 9/11, and I'm struck by the words of President Bush in his speech to a joint session of Congress in the immediate aftermath, and he said that we're in a fight for our principles, and our first responsibility is to live by them, and no one should be singled out for unfair treatment or unkind words because of their ethnic background or religious faith. And that's not just true in the aftermath of 9/11, that's true every single day. And we as a community have to be unafraid to call evil by name, to recognize hate for what it is, and be willing to speak out against it. And I want to thank all of our speakers today for doing that and trying to be a part of the solution. And I think, eventually by all of us working together, we're going to get there. But I want to thank each of you for helping us take an important, not a first step, but an important step towards that end. So I appreciate your participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not actually as eloquent as my colleagues here, and I'm not actually on this committee, but I am a legislator and a new legislator at that. And so I want to thank everybody who spoke so compellingly about your experiences. It's not easy. I do try cases, and I know when people testify, they relive the experience, and including the pain that you experience through the bias and criminal activities based on race and hatred. My experience as a legislator in only the last couple of months have been eye-opening. Within 45 days of taking office, I received a contact form from a constituent at a synagogue in my district, and who asked me to help with reaching out to both the police and to the district attorney's office. Mr. Meany from your office, Commissioner Ryder from your office, and the response from both the DA's office and the police department was outstanding. But they had to communicate the problem. You can't do anything about a problem that you don't know about. And then another very simple, very short story. I'll be mercifully brief. I got a request from another constituent. Also, it came from a synagogue in my district concerning a crosswalk. It had nothing to do with bias. And it was I went on a Saturday morning to the crosswalk just so I could see what it looked like. And what needed to be done traffic-wise. While there was a woman standing outside the synagogue. I said, "Do you know so-and-so?" The man who called me about the crosswalk. She said, "No, but he may be inside with my husband. My husband's always the last to leave." I said, "I know, my wife complains I'm the last to leave church." I said, "Can I go in and speak to him?" And she said, you can, but I don't have the code." There was a keypad on the outside of the door that I got chills down my spine when she said that. I've been going to the same church for 53 years. You just walk in on a Sunday morning. And so it's been eye-opening. So thank you for sharing. And I did want to be here. I did volunteer and push my way in onto the Anti-Semitism Task Force. And I think this is so necessary. And I want to thank our chairwoman and all of our legislators who spoke today for this. I hope we continue this and we continue the process to root out this type of evil. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and I thank you, Commissioner Ryder and Sergeant, for testifying today. Janine Deal, thank you very much, and Chief, thank you so much for all of this. And we will be reaching out to the DA. Hopefully, we can all continue working together, because I think we now understand that there's a task that we need to start working on, and hopefully coming to a conclusion on it, so that we can get the message out to everybody that Nassau County should not be a county where we tolerate hate, especially these crimes that are committed against many of the minorities. And we're a blended community now, and we have to act like that. I always believe in love of fellow man, and we really have to send that message out so everybody knows. And Eric, I thank you very much for your outreach, and for all of you. I'm going to not say your names right, and I do apologize, because your testimonies are very, very moving, and it really has to instill in us, it's time that, we can't stand by silently and allowing a lot of this stuff to go on. We have to stop it, and it has to stop with each and every single one of us. But thank you all, and have a good afternoon, okay?